to please mute their computers or devices, and please use the chat, which I'll be monitoring, to have questions, but we should have time at the end for some back and forth. I'm going to do a brief introduction for both Eric and Hig, and then turn it over to them. So Eric Clarke started working on trails 29 years ago when he discovered he could get paid to hike, work, and play in the woods. He's a graduate of UC Santa Cruz, migrated up to Alaska due to a road trip as a kid that exposed him to the great land. He has worked as a crew member with the Chugach National Forest, led crews with Alaska State Parks, both paid and volunteer in trail construction and maintenance, and has done layout design and construction with state parks. He's currently the trail coordinator for Tutka Bay State Park, roaming the trails, working with volunteers to keep trails open and assisting with partners on new projects. And one of those partners has been Hig Higman, who's the co-founder and executive director of Ground Truth Alaska. He and Aaron McKittrick are responsible for the existence, vision, and ongoing development of that organization. Hig received a PhD in geology from the University of Washington in 2007, and he also studied at Carleton College in Minnesota. He grew up in Seldovia, where his family moved when he was 8 months old, and then he graduated from high school there, spent 13 years going to school, grad school, and other studies, and then walked and pack raft from Seattle to the Aleutians before moving back to Seldovia. And now he lives in a yurt with his family, 100 yards from his mother's, where he and Aaron are raising their children and running Ground Truth Alaska. He also has done some interesting work on pumped energy storage, but that's another thing that he can share at another time. But Hig and Eric, please take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and this is not the same presentation we gave a couple of years ago, partly because this format is a little different, and so I kind of have my own thing, and then Eric will have some comments afterwards, I think. Yeah, we're going to be talking about this trail. I'm going to really spend quite a bit of time actually talking about what the trail is, but I hope that'll be a good context to talk about kind of a broader question that I see kind of embedded in here is this model that we've explored, which I think is a little bit unusual, is that something that could be applied elsewhere? Steve gave me a really nice introduction there. I won't go into this much. I go by Hig, geologist. A lot of my day job's really a data analyst. So I spent a lot of time pushing numbers around, trying to get them to play nice together. Lived in Alaska basically my whole life, done a lot of wilderness adventure. And I spent a lot of my time as a volunteer. That's a really big part of my life, is doing things where I do not get paid. What I'm not is a trail professional. This is definitely not my background, and it's something that over the last 5 years working on this project, I've learned a lot of things that from trail professionals and about what trail professionals know, but that is definitely not my background. I'm going to be talking about this trail that's in Tutka Bay State Park, and this is just kind of I don't actually have the park boundary on here, I apologize, but this gives you some context. Here's Homer with its road system, and Seldovia, where I live, and its little road system. And then these green lines here are the trails in the park as of 10 years ago or so. And what we've been building is this trail over here in this area of the park. So it's really kind of a different part of the park than most of the trail development has happened historically. It's actually, a lot of it is in the area that's designated state wilderness park rather than state park, although there's a little bit of the normal state park in there. If you add in the existing trails that are continuous with our trail, then it looks like this. So if we were just to kind of claim some of the pre-existing trails as part of our trail.
Hey, can I interrupt you just for a second? So I just got a chat that some people are having trouble seeing it, but
really?
It seemed like I've got it clear. So is that happening to other folks? Can you let me know in the chat or unmute yourself and let us know?
Yeah, feel free to jump in if you have any questions anywhere along the way too. Anyone okay. Who wants to interrupt us. That's great.
So it looks like most folks can see it. So sorry to the person who cannot. And that is likely perhaps something with their computer. So sorry, please continue.
All right. Most people access the trail by water taxi from the Homer Spit. And so this is some of the places they'd access it. Now, the boundary of the park, oh, let's see, that's the one other piece of this is that, this is what these trails here are what were there a decade or so ago. In maybe a little more than a decade ago, the trails, a number of trails have actually gone away as a result of difficulties in maintaining them. This is partly, a lot of these trails were built with EVOS money in the 90s, but there wasn't an effort in that to set aside the funds for trail maintenance. Plus the bark beetle came through and killed a lot of forest. I think there's also some other issues around trails that were built through areas with really thick brush that require a lot of maintenance, and several trails that have been lost to changes in river courses. So, so when you start showing it like this, our trail is becoming quite a bit of the trail system in Kachemak Bay State Park. The edge of the park's right here. I've just added this little line. And if you start looking to trails outside the park, there is actually a trail that is kind of continuous with ours, just sort of by coincidence as to where the trail ends here. And so if you were to kind of get imaginative, and I'll go into this in a little more detail later, and this is part of why I'm excited about the next set of presentations, you could imagine actually connecting through DNR land and easements from here right to Seldovia. And then it would be a 50-mile long trail, a pretty significant trail in Alaska's set of trails. So this is the area where it starts. This picture is taken right over the end of the trail, looking at Taylor Bay and the mountains on the south side. And one of the things that actually was really a big surprise for us this summer, there was a huge growth. And I think partly this was COVID, and I think partly this was just the word spreading. But we had a huge number of through hikers during one 13-day period. We actually we were on the trail for that 13 days and ran into 34 different people on the trail. And these are all people doing multi-day hikes. So they're really, that represents a lot of days of time out in the wilderness. And also, if you look at the economics, this is, tens of thousands of dollars because these people are almost all flying out to the far end of the trail. And there's other logistical costs as well. This is Tutka Bay, which was the other end of the trail for some time, and the namesake of the trail. This is kind of maybe the iconic view of the trail, looking from what we call Lunch Mountain out along Tutka Bay to Mount Iliamna. In the last couple of years, we've extended the trail over Sentinel Ridge, and that's how we were able to connect it into pre-existing trails. This is just a profile of the trail along its length. It's about 32 miles now, including the pre-existing park trails to get all the way to Jackaloff. And a lot of the trail is actually above tree line. So this dark green to light green transition is tree line here. And so you spend a lot of time up in the tundra and even higher. It has almost 10,000 feet of climb on it. It's a very, very challenging 32 miles. And when I say trail, in some places it is, I'll show some pictures where you see, wow, that's a trail. In other places, you might see a cairn and you might be looking for the next one. It's not, it's not continuous tread across this whole distance. And there's everything in between as well. So a little bit of a very brief history here. The idea for this trail started with a conversation and amongst a bunch of park users, myself included, kind of envisioning what exciting trails could happen in the future. And I brought up this route that I was really familiar with. I've spent a lot of time bushwhacking back here. It's a great bushwhack route. And people were really excited about it. And I was super, super naive at that time. I had no idea what was involved in building a trail. So to me, it sounded easy. I was like, well, we've got a bushwhack route. We'll cut away a few branches and boom, got a trail. If I had any idea what I was getting into, I would not have done it. But now I'm totally hooked and really into it. So complete change in my perspective as this has gone along. So the way we kind of went through a process in order to start the project. So we applied for a special use permit with the state park. And that permit includes things like stipulations and standards and stuff that we should follow. And we've built the trail with volunteer effort and some RTP funds and donations. I wanted to have some touching on standards. I don't want to dive really deep into this, and I kind of struggle a little bit with how to best address this. But one thing that's really easy is we have the 16% grade standard. So I'll just start there. That is central to how the whole trail is laid out. There are exceptions to this, but this is sort of conceptually like one of the very first things that comes up, and it is stipulated in our permit. We also put a lot of effort into avoiding brush, and most particularly in our area, it's the salmonberries. Salmonberries can choke out a trail twice in 1 year. They're really, really aggressive and require a lot of maintenance. Now, this standard is not in our permit, and it's also not something that we, there are exceptions to this as well. Sometimes you have to go through some salmonberries, but we put a lot of effort, just like we do with 16% grade, in picking a route that avoids brush that will make maintenance difficult. Going beyond this, I think that for me, what's most useful is think about this in terms of broad goals of what the standards are supposed to do. You want to have a trail that hikers will follow. That's partly they need to be able to follow it. They need to be able to see it. They have to have sight lines or cairns or tread or something to lead the way. But it also has to be something they want to follow. So it needs to kind of reflect that psychology of the hiker. We want to minimize that maintenance effort. Of course, it's central to everyone's trail work, and maximize the trail experience. I mean, that's the point ultimately, is we're making something for people to experience. So we try to think about that a lot. And there's also this idea of protecting park resources, which we spend a lot of effort on. I know it's really important to the park administration and such. This can be a very subjective idea, we found, and so it's actually been a sort of a difficult one to systematically apply at times, but it's very much there and very much central to how we approach trail building. So as I said, this is a volunteer-built trail, so I wanted to give you some idea of what that means. We've had about 100 different volunteers over the years, averaging 10 days of effort each. And these are the adult volunteers. This ranges from some people who have spent literally like an hour. They were hiking through, they stopped and joined the trail crew as they went by. Other people, I think I've spent about 130 days total. And so I'm the other end of that spectrum. And really there's, I think somewhere around 20 to 30 people have spent over 10 days. So a lot of people have spent a lot of time out here. And really the kids are, that's the adult days. There's something like 300 days of kid time out there. I won't say that they've been the most productive volunteers, but I think that's really important because they're learning about what it is to maintain a trail, and they're kind of the future owners of this, of the park and of the trail. And on the money end, we've got 2 RTP grants in the past, a total about $26,000. And I don't have a really exact tally, but somewhere around $10,000 in other donations. So I think compared to a lot of the numbers that you guys are used to looking at, these probably look kind of small. And one of the things that funding, the RTP funding, has paid for is training by professionals. This is Eric Rojancic. He came in from outside and did a really awesome training, where one of the things we did is we built this retaining wall we're all standing on here. Super valuable.
Hey, how did you get to the 16%? Was that something specific to soils in the area, or what made you settle on that percentage?
I don't know, Eric, do you want to jump in? And that one came straight from our permit there.
Yeah, we came up with 16%. Just dealing from my experience of working in Kachemak Bay State Park and trails that were built back in the 90s with EVOS money, and what I have been seeing over the 20 some odd years I have been working in this park. So that's how we came up with the 16%.
Sounds good.
And because this is the only trail, I mean, I have now worked on a number of other trails, but this has really been most of my trail experience. My brain is completely fixed on 16%. If someone, gave me an 18% or, 12% grade, I wouldn't know what to do. So these volunteer outings, one thing I think is distinct about what we do is that these are multi-day outings. This was at some level just practical. We've got, really remote areas, and we had to do that. But I've come to see that as really central to how we do this. So in 2020, our main outing, we had a couple others, but it was 25 days in the field. I was there for the full 25 days, but individual volunteers spent typically more than 5 days. And 5 days is what I usually ask for. I say, if you can, try to do 5 days. And that's because it's enough time to learn some skills, practice them, and then actually apply them as, an independent leader of using that. So that's been really, really important to the learning we've been able to do as a group of volunteers. Some of the park concerns that I think really, helped set us on track and really defined a lot of what we had to do in order to work together. One of the big questions is, where are the resources for oversight and maintenance? And so part of that, the maintenance end, was relatively easy in that the park could say, hey, you're going to have to maintain this if you're going to build it. And so we've really taken that to heart. Oversight, though, is something we might be able to help a little bit more than we have with. I hope Eric and I have been having conversations about that, but it's a challenge, and that the park is really stretched thin already, and we add the super remote trail that's difficult to get to. It's hard for them to provide that oversight. And how do we minimize impact to the park? I mean, you can imagine the position that Eric and Jason, the ranger, were in as we were applying for this, picturing this horde of volunteers going out into the wilderness, making a big mess, not knowing what we're doing. I can see that concern. And then we were coming in, like I mentioned, I knew nothing as I started on this, and that's really true of most of the volunteers. We've had actually now over the years, we've had quite a few people with professional experience come in as volunteers. There are times even Eric was there as a volunteer, not as a paid overseer. And so we've gotten some of that knowledge, but really, it would have been reasonable to say this isn't even feasible for them to do a simple project, much less this incredibly complicated trail with, what now has 10,000 feet of climb almost. So I'm going to give a just quick tour running through the trail, coming from the south end, which is where actually most people start the trail, and going to the north. And this map I have, it has some of these thick dotted lines, which are future visions for things that don't exist right now. And so, for example, this one would cross the Taylor River, which is the most difficult crossing at a place where a bridge is feasible. And so the trail starts on the south coast. This is rainforest, kind of like Prince William Sound, super wet country. And it climbs up into Tutka Pass. This is actually a section that we improved this year. You can see the old animal trails that originally the trail followed, kind of a mix of these, and we made it into a continuous tread. And this is kind of the last bit of tread going up from the south side as you go into the Alpine. After this, you're following cairns for quite some distance. You go over Tutka Pass and you drop down through the valley beyond. It's this high alpine country with rock and tundra, often hikers hiking on snow as they go there. And from there down into sort of subalpine environments. Really just a beautiful area. We call this the tundra playground up here. And it's kind of the furthest that day hikers will get to coming from Tutka. We actually built a little spur with a campsite kind of within this subalpine environment that's been pretty successful as a way to kind of bring hikers to a place where a lot of people can camp and minimize their impact. And then it drops down to Tutka into the original trailhead down in this area. But in order to connect into further trails, we've built this trail up over Sentinel Ridge. So you can see that last photo I showed was right at this established campsite, and we built up over the ridge to connect into pre-existing trails. So the trail again goes up into the Alpine, provides another kind of day hike access to the Alpine. And it goes down these trails and past Tutka Lagoon. Tutka Lagoon actually has an operating hatchery that's within the park at it. It's a popular sports fishing destination too. And from there, it follows trails and easements out to the end of Jackaloff Bay Road. From here, you could drive to Seldovia, for instance. But there are these existing trails that follow old road beds here. And so I'll give you a little tour just looking in that direction too. This is the Red Mountain Road bed. It is not drivable anymore, but people do manage to get four-wheelers up it. So it's an actively used trail. It's actually quite popular along a 17B easement. It brings you up into Red Mountain Valley, which is famous in part for the mining, the chrome mining that was done back half a century ago in this area. And if so this is the existing trail. There is a 17B easement that connects to this area. This line shows the edge of DNR land here of the area that's not wasn't claimed by the Native associations. And so you could imagine, well, we could build a trail up through here, and you go through some more of this sort of really striking red mountain terrain. It's got really unusual geology, a very beautiful place, and onto this ridge system that is above Seldovia Bay. It's a beautiful ridge run, and ultimately down to Seldovia. Now, this last photo is one that was actually taken by a couple hikers from Anchorage who did Tutka Backdoor. And if what they ran into, and what any hiker would right now, is there's a bunch of sort of logistical challenges as you finish up at Jackaloff. You're in a place with no cell coverage and no amenities. So somehow you have to get down the road. Either you have to just start hiking the road or somehow have a range to pick up. There are confusing bits of trail. There's a section you walk on the beach. But despite all these barriers, they made their way all the way to Seldovia, and they enjoyed this classic kind of iconic view of Seldovia. And this was really influential to me. It makes me think that, if we did actually develop a trail all the way to Seldovia, I think people would use it. So I want to wrap up with just go back to the question I kind of started this with, is could this effort be replicated? Could we take and use this idea of a volunteer-led trail in order to see some really good development happen in other parts of the state? I think the answer is yes, but there are some significant challenges, definitely. One of the things is that you really need volunteer leaders are not the same as trail professionals. That's partly because trail professionals are employed being trail professionals during the time you can build trails. So you need to find people who actually have the time. Like I spent 25 days out last summer. I can do that because I'm, a data geek and spend my time working on the computer. I, can take off for 25 days in the middle of the summer and do a volunteer project. It's not something we can really ask a trail professional to do. So you need to have trail volunteers learning more than the shallow skills. They need to be really get this sort of intensive training. There's this balance between land manager goals and responsibilities and the vision of volunteers. Speaking on the volunteer end, I mean, this is a very emotional engagement. Like, this is not, if I wanted this to be my job, it would be a very, very different situation. But the reason I do this, the reason I put energy into this, is I am emotionally engaged in this trail. I have a feeling of vision, of helping the community, of trying to create something amazing. It's like being an artist. So that's a very important part to where I can find the energy to actually go out and do all of this. Land managers come from a very different perspective. They have to do their job, and those two things, in our experience, have come into conflict at times. And it's been a complicated thing for Eric and I to explore. How do we, balance those, and how do we do something useful there and work together? You clearly need to have a sense of long-term planning. I think an upside from this approach is that it is intrinsic to it is building a community of trail volunteers who can be there in the future to actually maintain that trail. Trail projects really should reflect what the local communities want. That's where all of our volunteers are local volunteers. They're from Homer, Seldovia, some come from Anchorage and such, but we've never had someone who was like, oh, I'm going to go to Alaska because I can volunteer on this trail. This is all about locals doing something that they're excited to see. And it's also those locals will be around in order to maintain the trail in the future. So there really has to be that connection to what local, it needs to be driven kind of by the local desires, I guess. And I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope I didn't take too long. I forgot to put my timer next to me. I think Eric has a few comments. I'm going to go ahead and I'll keep the screen. And Eric, if you want me to jump to any slide or anything like that, I'm happy to do that. And hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions too.
Yeah. Hey, can you just put it back? Oh, sorry. Hey, didn't mean to talk over you there. Could you put it back to the last slide? The one.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, because with all the points. So the thing is that what I just really wanted to interject, and from not interject or add to all this is that could this be replicated? Is that I think it can, and the way maintenance dollars and the way funding, especially in this state, in this type of environment, is that we have to, if we want to keep trails like the Tutka Backdoor open, or even our existing trails. And we have done that within the park for many years. Used volunteers for usually college age students for maintaining our trails as much as we could. And we are now also ramping up, dealing with the Friends of Kachemak Bay, with locals, people from Homer that are passionate about keeping the trails open in the park and working with them. There's the water trail people that deal with the water trail that we have been working with. The Homer Cycling Club is another nonprofit that we have been working with in the Diamond Creek Diamond Creek Recreation Area. But thinking through all this, one of the things from a land manager or trail manager perspective, that there's 4 points that really could make these things really successful. And I think that's where I'm starting to focus on. And these 4 points I have are pretty much there. It's making sure that there are clear standards written out and that people can follow, and clear standards, trail standards, be it if it's grades and brushing standards, all that kind of stuff. Inspections, and that's where is really important. And that's the thing of it's not only to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, but since it is a volunteer effort, the more guidance that land managers and trail managers and people that are professionals can give, and feedback and positive feedback, plus also, structural, just some criticism of what can make things better. That I think with volunteers coming in, not having much training, that is very, very, I can't even think of the word right now. It's very helpful. It's the best way to put it, and it's appreciated, at least from what I've seen dealing with people in the park. Trainings are immense. I think like what Hig was saying is that it's just like volunteers need intensive training. And that comes back dealing with managers, if you don't have the time to do the trainings yourself, there is a lot of other avenues. There's a lot of professional trail outfits out there now that can provide training that people can look into. There's nonprofit organizations that have set up trainings, like the Pacific Crest Trail Association, for one, that you can glean from and add to, and kind of morph into what would work for them. And it could be everything from basic trail concepts to, specialty kind of work, just like the rock work that was done on the Tutka Backdoor Trail. And then the 4th one is, communication is big, and trying to keep that open is huge and challenging at times because of dealing with what a volunteer vision is versus what the responsibilities of a land manager and the goals of what they're looking for in a long term need to be. And those are my kind of really 4 things that I wanted to add into all this. So if there's any other questions.
So we did, thanks Eric, and thanks Hig. We did get a question. You mentioned the trails that were built using funds from the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and then a bunch of blowdowns and other things, kind of, I don't want to say erased, but, covered up those trails. So what's your plan to not have that happen to this trail? And is there any way to reopen those ones that were, I'll just say, closed because of beetle kill?
I'll take the plans for this one, and maybe Eric can say something about the reopening. I mentioned some of this is, about building community and so on. And so hopefully that, there is that sustainability of a volunteer effort to keep this open. I do think that if I got hit by a bus, there would be people who would be going out there. There's a lot of people really passionately engaged with this trail. And so I think that's critical. There are a few like specific things, like one thing we spend a lot of time thinking about that I think is a little unusual is we really try to design our trail for bears too. Bears are huge users in our park. We have like some of the highest black bear concentrations in the state, and we have found that if you can build the trail so the black bears will follow it, which is somewhat more challenging than getting the humans to follow it in some cases, then they keep it worn down and keep that tread in place. We also, part of the reason for putting this trail where it is it goes through a lot of high country. We've been lucky in the area where this is that there hasn't been that beetle kill, but I think it is totally possible we would see, especially either beetle kill, aphids, or massive blowdowns could take out big sections of forest. And when that happens, that will mean we have a lot of work on our hands to keep it open during that process of tree fall.
Yeah, and then for the park, we have in the past, I'm going to say 4 years, started really heavily working with people in Homer and keeping trails open. And now the organization Friends for Kachimak Bay there's been a few people in there that we have trained that want to go out and open trails up, brushing them out, giving them some saw experience and training, so they go out with their own tools and all that, and have gone out, like for the Sadie Knob Trail, have reopened that. And with all the trails that have happened, especially with the beetle kill that happened in the 90s, that is what was the big, huge game changer with the trails in the park, because once the canopy went away, the brush came up, and the Devil's Club and the elderberry and the salmon berries and everything just like came out of nowhere, because now they have all the sun. So we are going to be continuing working with the Friends and doing some trainings with people that want to go over and making them more independent so they can go over and do this. And there are a few people that have really spearheaded that within that organization, and it's going forward. So that's what our plan is to get people to go out there without us leading, so to speak, but training leaders to go out and do these things to what we're looking for, or what I'm going to say, what I'm looking for as a trail manager, and keeping trails open, and how, and the reasons why we do the things we do, and behind all that.
Great. Well, I would encourage others to put some more questions in the chat box. Hig, I have a couple for you. The first is, how did COVID affect your operations this past summer? And then looking forward, what is it that you need to continue? Do you need, it doesn't sound like, obviously you need some money, but is it funding? Is it volunteers? Is it just more time? What's the future projection for you?
Yeah, well, COVID was definitely we were pretty unsure how to approach that. We did our best to, we're, camping widely separated, and, so that it's something that's feasible. We like to have a big party tent. We didn't do that this year. And I'd say, it worked out okay. It's an outdoor activity, but yeah, definitely awkward and not the place we wanted to be in, like this, volunteer community operation. And you were asking about what we need going forward. And one idea that actually Eric and I had a little conversation about this, but it's something that's mostly still in idea space that I'm kind of excited about. Would be to secure a little bit of funding. I think we could do this within donations and stuff, to pay trail professionals to do trail inspections, basically. And this would not be kind of for the same purpose. Eric, in the park, they need to do their inspections, and that has a very specific purpose. And this isn't to completely replace that, although I hope it supplements it. It would relieve some of the stress on their limited resources. But this, as I'm picturing it, is that we would pay a trail professional to spend 3-4 days doing the through hike with a group of volunteers, and then they would help the volunteer, our volunteer group develop priorities going into the future. And one of the things, I see a number of things that are cool about this. One of the things I like about it is that it would be a way to just keep bringing new kind of new knowledge into that trail community, and we would actually, it wouldn't be a matter of saying, okay, here's the professional we work with every year. It would be like, let's, cycle around through all these different people with different perspectives, different experiences, and really bring that knowledge into the trail crew. But a lot of that comes down to like, how do you set those priorities? How do you, I mean, I've actually mapped at one point last winter, I went through and I was just like, well, what if I make up all the things I think we need to do? And I came up with like 1,000 days worth of effort that I can see, ultimately this has to boil down to priorities. And this year we really learned that, wow, the through hikers are probably our central user. It's the day hikers are there and they do increased wear and tear on the most proximal pieces of the trail. But the through hikers were really huge. And so that means that the whole trail is on the table, and some pieces of the trail really need a lot of work. And how do we best prioritize that? It's a big question.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat box. I want to thank you both, Eric and Hig, for talking to us this morning. A friendly reminder to everybody, the videos will be, the recordings of this as well as the presentations will be posted on our website. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows there's a separate link for each of our Zoom presentations today. So I apologize. I should have maybe just had one big Zoom. You could have left it on all day, but you do have to log in for each of them, including our next session, which starts in 8 minutes at 11 o'clock on reserving trails on state lands and 17B easements. So we hope you can join us then. But again, thank you to our presenters. We wish you continued success with the project, and we really appreciate you speaking to us today.
Thanks.
You.
Thanks, Steve.
Great. Have a good day, everybody. We'll see you soon.